My name is Gwen Coleman. I'm 32 years old, and I work in commercial real estate in Pennsylvania. One of those jobs that sounds boring until you realize it's really about reading people through numbers and contracts. I make a living spotting risk before it explodes, which is ironic considering how long it took me to see my own marriage unraveling. 3 years before everything fell apart, I bought a townhouse that looked like it had been decorated by someone who thought beige was a lifestyle. Beige walls, beige carpet, beige tile with brown accents that somehow made the bathroom feel smaller and sadder. Most people would have hired a contractor. I didn't. I spent 6 months rebuilding that place myself. Weekends at Home Depot, evenings watching YouTube tutorials like they were law school lectures. I learned crown molding by trial and error, ripped out cabinets, replaced fixtures, painted every room until the air permanently smelled like fresh primer and control. My dad helped me with the electrical because I'm ambitious, not reckless. Everything else was mine. I even built custom shelving in the garage, measured, leveled, labeled, because apparently that's who I am when I feel stable. That townhouse wasn't just a home. It was proof. Proof that I could build something solid, something that stayed standing, even when life tried to shake it loose. I didn't realize yet that it would become the center of a war. I met Ethan in 2018 at my cousin's wedding. He was friends with the groom, worked as an event coordinator for a hotel group, and had this way of making every conversation feel lighter. He laughed easily. He listened when I talked. And when I mentioned interest rates or zoning laws, he didn't glaze over like most people did. He asked questions. That alone felt rare. I'm structured, careful. I plan vacations the same way I analyze property portfolios. Ethan was spontaneous, romantic, the kind of man who chose restaurants based on vibes instead of reviews. Dating him felt like starring in one of those movies where the responsible woman learns to loosen up. He dragged me to art galleries, weekend trips to small towns I'd never heard of. He even convinced me to try hot yoga once. I lasted exactly one session before deciding that sweating that much voluntarily was not spiritual growth. It was punishment. But I loved that he tried to expand my world. He made me laugh, made me feel like I was more than just spreadsheets and sensible shoes. We moved in together after 6 months. Too fast in hindsight, but I was 27 and convinced that momentum meant love. His parents were cordial. His dad, Graham, ran an auto body shop. Blue collar, direct. The kind of man who respected hard work above everything else. When he saw my townhouse renovation, his eyes lit up. He inspected my floors like they were an engine rebuild and gave me a nod of approval that somehow meant more than words. His mom, Diane, was polite in a way that never quite relaxed. She complimented my furniture while her eyes scanned the room like she was mentally rearranging it. She always looked at me like she was quietly asking herself if I was temporary. They visited every couple of months. I'd clean the house until it sparkled. Graham would comment on my craftsmanship. Diane would smile and suggest throw pillows. Normal in-law dynamics, I told myself. For the first few years, Ethan and I worked well together. He handled the social calendar, birthdays, work events, dinner plans. I handled the practical things, bills, home maintenance, car issues. He liked that I made adulthood feel manageable. I liked that he made life feel alive. After 3 years together, we got married at a vineyard 2 hours north. Small ceremony, 80 people, nothing flashy. Ethan vetoed my plan to wear the same suit I used for client meetings. Apparently, wedding attire is a separate category of seriousness. The wedding was beautiful. Ethan looked at me like I was the only person in the room. His dad gave the classic speech about how I'd better take care of his son. I gave a toast that probably had too many real estate jokes. I remember thinking, this is it. This is the life I built. We honeymooned in the Caribbean, and I got the worst sunburn of my life because I underestimated the equator like an idiot. Somewhere between aloe applications and laughing at ourselves, we talked about our future like it was guaranteed. That's where the prenup comes in. Before we got married, I insisted on one, not because I thought Ethan was a gold digger, but because I'd worked too hard to pretend the past didn't matter. My townhouse had nearly doubled in value since I bought it. The neighborhood gentrified fast. A craft brewery opened, then coffee shops, then yoga studios. Suddenly, my working-class area was trendy. I'd also inherited $75,000 from my grandmother 2 years before meeting Ethan. I used some for the renovation and invested the rest. By the time we married, it had grown to around $95,000. I wanted to protect what existed before Ethan entered my life. Ethan didn't like that. He told me it meant I didn't trust him, that it felt like I was planning for divorce before we even said I do. The words were emotional, but the tactic was obvious. Make me feel guilty enough to drop it. I didn't. I explained calmly that it wasn't about him. It was about reality. People change. Life changes. Love doesn't magically shield assets from damage. What surprised me was Graham backing me up. He told Ethan it was smart, that real marriages could survive a prenup, that love didn't require ownership of someone's past. We drafted something fair. Anything I owned before marriage stayed mine. The townhouse, savings, investments. Anything we built together would be split evenly. If we divorced, Ethan would receive $2,000 a month for 24 months to help him get established. We both signed, notarized, filed. Done. The first 4 years of marriage looked normal from the outside. We worked, traveled. Ethan advanced in his career. I moved up at my firm. Ethan made about $48,000 a year, enough for his expenses and half the utilities. I covered the mortgage since it was my house. It felt fair. Then things started changing. Ethan began going out more with work friends, staying out later, coming home restless, like he was chasing something just out of reach. He lost interest in our quiet weekends. I told myself it was stress. Then he started talking about a new friend from work. Aiden. Aiden thinks this. Aiden says that. Aiden believes traditional monogamy is outdated. Every conversation somehow looped back to Aiden's opinions, like my husband had outsourced his personality. Ethan started using phrases that didn't sound like him. Marriage as a social construct. Jealousy as toxic insecurity. Ethical non-monogamy as personal growth. The first time he said it, I laughed. Then he didn't stop. He sent me articles, asked hypothetical questions, suggested we needed to be more adventurous in our relationship. I assumed it would fade. Ethan always had phases. This one didn't. And the more he pushed, the tighter something felt in my chest. Not fear exactly. Instinct. The same instinct I get when a deal feels wrong, when someone keeps smiling while quietly changing the terms. Then, last month, Ethan texted me at work. Dinner somewhere nice tonight. We need to talk about our future. I assumed counseling, kids, something serious but fixable. I put on a black dress and went to the upscale Italian restaurant he chose, the kind with no prices on the menu and portions small enough to insult you. I walked in, scanned the room, and saw our table. Ethan was already seated, and he wasn't alone. A woman sat beside him, close enough that her knee almost touched his. She looked up at me and smiled like she belonged there. Ethan stood quickly, nervous energy radiating off him. "Gwen," he said, voice too bright, "I want you to meet someone." And before he even said her name, my townhouse flashed in my mind. The walls, the floors, the locks. Everything I built to keep my life safe. And I knew, deep in my bones, that something was about to try and take it from me. The woman stood before Ethan could finish his sentence. She was younger than me, late 20s maybe, and dressed in that carefully casual way that probably took longer than my entire outfit. Soft waves in her hair, neutral makeup, the kind of smile that said she'd practiced this moment in the mirror. "I'm Tessa," she said, extending her hand. "It's really nice to finally meet you." Finally. That word landed wrong. I didn't take her hand. Instead, I looked at Ethan, really looked at him. His shoulders were tight. His eyes kept darting between us like he was monitoring a live experiment. "What is this?" I asked quietly. Ethan swallowed, then gestured for me to sit. Just sit for a second, Gwen. Please. We want to talk." That was when the air changed. When the noise of the restaurant, the clinking glasses, the low music, the conversations faded into something distant and muffled. I sat down slowly, my movements controlled in a way that surprised even me. Tessa sat back down beside Ethan, close enough that their arms brushed. Ethan reached for his wineglass, then stopped, then picked it up again like his body didn't know what script to follow. "So," he said, forcing a smile, "I wanted to be honest with you about something important." Honest. That word almost made me laugh. Tessa is my girlfriend. There it was. No build-up, no apology, no hesitation. Just a sentence dropped into the space between us like a grenade. I stared at him, then at her, then back at him. "I'm sorry," I said slowly. "You're what?" "My girlfriend," Ethan repeated, like maybe I hadn't heard him the first time. "I've been seeing her for about 3 months now." 3 months. My mind started doing math before my heart could even react. 3 months of late nights. 3 months of unexplained distance. 3 months of my husband lying to my face while sleeping next to me. "And," he continued quickly, "this isn't cheating. I need you to understand that. This is me finally being honest about who I am. Tessa nodded along, lips pressed together sympathetically, like we were discussing a difficult medical diagnosis. I've realized, Ethan said, that I'm not built for traditional monogamy. I've always known something felt off, suppressed, and Aiden really helped me understand that. Of course he did. I have a swinger nature, Ethan said, lowering his voice like it was a confession instead of an accusation. I just never felt safe enough to share it before, until now. I waited for the punchline, the hidden camera, the reveal that this was some cruel joke or misguided test. Nothing came. I wanted you two to meet, he said, smiling nervously, so we could all be open about this new dynamic, about moving forward honestly. Tessa leaned in slightly. I really respect what you and Ethan have, she said softly. I'm not trying to replace you or anything. This is about addition, not subtraction. Addition, like we were discussing kitchen renovations. I felt something strange settle over me. Not panic, not rage. Clarity. So, I said, my voice steady, let me make sure I understand this. Ethan nodded eagerly, like a student hoping the teacher was finally catching on. You cheated on me for 3 months, I continued, and now you're framing it as self-discovery. It wasn't cheating, he said quickly. I didn't have the language for it yet. That's different. Is it? I asked. He hesitated. Tessa jumped in. Ethical non-monogamy is all about honesty and consent. Ethan really struggled with how to tell you. I looked at her for the first time directly. You slept with my husband, I said calmly. You don't get to explain ethics to me. Her smile flickered. Ethan reached across the table, touching my wrist. I pulled my hand back immediately. I know this is a shock, he said, but once you sit with it, I think you'll realize this could actually strengthen our marriage. A lot of couples explore alternative arrangements. It doesn't mean I love you any less. The mental gymnastics were impressive. He cheated, rebranded it, and now wanted credit for honesty. And you thought, I asked, that introducing me to her at a public restaurant was the best way to do this? Ethan winced. Aiden said it was brave, transparent, that ripping off the bandage would be healthier than dragging it out. I almost smiled. Of course he did. Tessa nodded again. He talks about you all the time, she added. You're really important to him. Something inside me clicked. The last thread of hope, that this was a misunderstanding, a temporary insanity, snapped cleanly. I stood up. Both of them froze. Good luck, I said. Ethan's face drained of color. Wait, what? Gwen, where are you going? We need to talk about this. No, I said calmly. You talked. I listened. I'm done. You can't just leave, he said, panic creeping into his voice. This is a conversation, a process. You made a decision 3 months ago, I replied. I'm just catching up. I grabbed my coat and walked out of the restaurant. I didn't look back. I sat in my car in the parking lot for 20 minutes afterward, staring at the steering wheel like it might explain how my life had just imploded between appetizers and entrees. My husband of 5 years had introduced me to his affair partner and called it personal growth. I drove home on autopilot. When Ethan came back an hour later, I was sitting on the couch with a notebook open, already writing a list. Documents, lawyer, locks, logistics. He walked in defensive, arms crossed, jaw tight. You didn't even give me a chance to explain, he snapped. Explain what? I asked. That you slept with her? That you decided you're a swinger now? It's not cheating if I'm honest about who I am, he insisted. You were honest after 3 months of lying, I said. That's not how honesty works. He sat beside me, reaching for my hand. I moved away. I really think, he said carefully, that if you gave this a chance, if you tried to understand, we could make this work. Lots of marriages survive worse than this. Survive, I repeated. That's your pitch? You're being close-minded, he said. Aiden says people who react like this are usually insecure. There it was again. Aiden. Always Aiden. I want a divorce, I said. Ethan laughed. Actually laughed. You're being dramatic, he said. Give it a week. Think about it rationally. I am thinking rationally, I replied. You cheated. You reframed it. You expect me to participate. I'm not interested. You can't throw away 5 years over a knee-jerk reaction. I stood up. Watch me. I went to the filing cabinet, pulled out the prenup, and made a copy. Behind me, Ethan's voice shifted, from confident to scared. You're serious? Yes. We can go to counseling, he rushed. I'll slow things down with Tessa. We don't have to rush into anything. You rushed 3 months ago, I said. I'm just matching your pace. That was the moment he understood. And that was the moment the real fight began. The next morning, I woke up with that eerie calm that only comes after something irreversible happens. No tears, no shaking hands, just clarity. Ethan was already gone when I came downstairs. His side of the bed was untouched, the way it gets when someone doesn't come home at all, or comes home late enough to avoid conversation. I made coffee, opened my laptop, and called my lawyer. Same attorney who handled the prenup. I didn't even need to explain much. I told him the short version. Affair, restaurant reveal, ethical non-monogamy pitch, refusal to participate. There was a pause on the line. Then he laughed, not unkindly, just stunned. In 30 years of family law, he said, I've seen a lot. But introducing your spouse to your affair partner at dinner and calling it personal growth, that's new. That laugh steadied me more than sympathy ever could. We filed for divorce that afternoon. Pennsylvania's no-fault process made it simple. No theatrics, no need to prove adultery. Just one clean statement. The marriage was irretrievably broken. Considering my husband had a girlfriend he wanted me to meet, I felt confident in that assessment. Ethan moved out within a week. He packed while I was at work, left his key on the kitchen counter like a symbolic mic drop. I didn't ask where he went. Didn't care if it was Tessa's place or Aiden's couch or his parents' house. The silence afterward was loud, but manageable. Then the demands started. 2 weeks after filing, my lawyer called me, and I could hear him trying not to laugh again. Your husband's attorney, he said carefully, is requesting half the value of your townhouse. I closed my eyes. On what grounds? He claims Ethan contributed to maintaining the household by paying utilities. Utilities. My lawyer continued. He's also asking for 3 years of spousal support instead of the 2 outlined in the prenup and half of your retirement account. I let out a slow breath. So he's pretending the prenup doesn't exist. Exactly. The response we sent back was polite, professional, and devastating. 12 references to the prenup. Copies of the signed, notarized agreement. Documentation proving both parties had independent legal counsel. A legal version of absolutely not. Ethan's counter-argument arrived a few days later. Duress. He claimed I pressured him before the wedding, that he didn't fully understand what he was signing, that he felt emotionally coerced. 6 months of negotiation, 2 lawyers, dozens of emails, all conveniently forgotten. Then the text started. At first, they were apologetic. I made a mistake. Tessa was a phase. I want to work on us. I didn't respond. Then they turned wounded. You're being cold. Don't you care about what we built? I just need help until things settle. Still nothing. Then angry. You're petty. I gave you the best years of my life. You owe me. Every message went into a folder on my phone labeled Ethan. Evidence. 3 weeks after filing, my phone rang from an unfamiliar number. I answered. Wow, Ethan said. You actually picked up. What do you want? I need you to understand something, he said quickly. The house thing? The money demands. That wasn't really my idea. My lawyer just pushed for it. Oh. I laughed once, short and sharp. You told him to push for it. Well, yeah, he admitted. But I didn't think you'd be so rigid. I thought you'd help me out. The prenup says otherwise. That was before everything happened, he said. Things are different now. They're exactly why the prenup exists. I need that money to start over, he snapped. You're being cruel. You should have thought about that before introducing me to your girlfriend. Silence. Then his voice cracked. She broke up with me. Of course she did. Said she didn't sign up for this much drama. Aiden stopped talking to me too. Said I handled everything wrong. I don't have anyone right now. For a brief second, just one, I felt something close to pity. Then I remembered the restaurant, the rehearsed smiles, the expectation that I'd swallow betrayal like medicine. Good luck, I said. Wait, he rushed. Can't we talk like adults? Can't we figure something out? We are, I replied. It's called divorce. I hung up. He called 6 more times. I sent every call to voicemail. The next call surprised me. It was Graham. What happened between you two? He asked. No small talk. She didn't tell you? She said you grew apart, he replied. That she made some mistakes, but nothing that justified ending the marriage. She said you're refusing to give her anything from the house. I told him everything. The dinner, Tessa, the swinger speech, the money demands. He didn't interrupt once. When I finished, he sighed, heavy, tired. She brought her girlfriend to meet you at a restaurant, he repeated slowly. Yes. And now she wants half your house. That's what her lawyer asked for. Another sigh. I'm sorry, he said. I didn't know any of this. The prenup's still valid? Yes. Then stick to it, he said firmly. You protected yourself for exactly this situation. Don't let her guilt you. That call did something important. It removed the last layer of doubt. A week before our preliminary hearing, Ethan made one final attempt. He showed up at my workplace. The receptionist told me I had a visitor. I walked into the lobby and saw him standing there, dressed professionally, holding a thick folder. We need to talk, he said. No, we don't. Just 5 minutes, he pleaded. Against my better judgment, I walked him to the parking lot. He handed me the folder. Inside were photos, wedding pictures, vacation shots, screenshots of sweet texts from years ago. I made a timeline, he said, of us, of everything we built. I flipped through it slowly. A scrapbook of a marriage that no longer existed. What's your point? I asked. We were happy, he said. We can be happy again. One mistake shouldn't erase 5 years. You didn't make a mistake, I said. You made a decision. It was a joke, he blurted suddenly. I stared at him. The restaurant thing, he rushed. It was a test. Tessa was an actor. I wanted to see if you'd fight for me. I almost laughed. A 3-month joke. He faltered. Okay, she was real, he admitted. But the swinger thing wasn't. Aiden said it sounded better than admitting an affair. I closed the folder. We're getting divorced. Please, he said, grabbing my arm. I'll drop the house demands. Just don't leave me with nothing. You're getting 2 years of support, I replied. That's not nothing. That's barely enough to survive. You make $48,000 a year, I said calmly. You'll survive. Court was next. And unlike Ethan, the prenup didn't care about rebrands, excuses, or rewritten memories. The preliminary hearing was scheduled for a Tuesday morning. Gray sky, sharp cold, the kind of Pennsylvania weather that makes everything feel heavier than it already is. I arrived early, not because I was nervous, but because I wanted control over at least one variable that day. Ethan showed up 10 minutes late. He looked smaller somehow, thinner. The confidence he'd worn, like armor for years, was gone, replaced with something brittle and frantic. He avoided my eyes as he sat beside his lawyer, fingers tapping against his knee like his body hadn't caught up to reality yet. His mother, Diane, sat behind him, lips pressed into a thin line. She didn't look at me. Not once. I could feel the judgment radiating off her like heat. Graham wasn't there. That told me everything I needed to know. The judge, a man in his late 50s with tired eyes and zero patience for theatrics, reviewed the documents quietly. The prenup, the signatures, the notarization stamps, the emails showing 6 months of negotiations and independent legal counsel. When Ethan's lawyer began arguing duress, the judge raised a hand. Counsel, he said flatly, I've been practicing family law for over 20 years. This agreement is not only valid, it's textbook. Ethan shifted in his seat. His lawyer tried again, claimed Ethan would be left destitute, claimed the agreement was unconscionable, claimed Ethan had sacrificed career opportunities to support mine. That was when my lawyer stood. He calmly presented salary records, promotion history, documentation showing Ethan's income had increased nearly $12,000 during the marriage, that his career had advanced, not stalled. The judge leaned back in his chair. Making $48,000 a year with consistent promotions, he said, does not constitute career sacrifice. Ethan's face drained of color. The ruling was swift. The prenup stood. No claim to the townhouse. No access to premarital investments. No extended spousal support. Ethan received exactly what he agreed to. $2,000 a month for 24 months. Nothing more. Diane's mouth tightened as if she'd bitten into something sour. Ethan stared straight ahead, unmoving, like he was hoping the room would disappear if he refused to acknowledge it. Outside the courtroom, Graham caught up with me. I'm sorry, he said quietly, for all of it. Diane doesn't see it clearly, but I do. I nodded. Thank you. She made her choices, he added. She shouldn't have tried to drag you down with her. I walked out of the courthouse feeling nothing. No triumph, no rage. Just done. The cold hit me immediately, sharp and biting. I sat in my car with the heat running, watching Ethan and his mother leave together. Ethan looked back once, just once. I didn't wave, I didn't smile, I didn't chase. 3 weeks later, the house felt different, lighter. The first thing I did was change the locks, not because I thought Ethan would come back, but because I needed the reset, new keys, new boundaries. Then I repainted the bedroom. Ethan had insisted on this dusty rose color I hated from day one. It took 4 coats of slate gray to cover it properly. But when I stepped back and looked at the finished walls, something inside me finally unclenched. I finished projects I'd put off for years. Turned the basement into a proper workshop and entertainment space. Built a bar with reclaimed wood. Installed better lighting. A real sound system. My dad came over one weekend to help with wiring. We didn't talk much about the divorce. We didn't need to. Working with my hands, building something that stayed, felt like reclaiming myself piece by piece. The fallout kept coming in quieter ways. Mutual friends disappeared. Out of 15 couples we regularly spent time with, exactly 3 stayed in touch. One couple, Dave and Michelle, actually asked for my side. When they heard about the restaurant reveal, Dave texted, "Did she expect you to high-five her girlfriend? That's insane." Michelle confronted Ethan at a work event later, told him introducing your spouse to your affair partner wasn't working on your marriage. It was ending it with extra steps. According to one of Ethan's coworkers, the entire office had known about the affair. Aiden had coached him. Conference hotels, excuses, language. There had even been a betting pool on how long it would take me to find out. That part stung. Not because I felt foolish, but because it confirmed something I already knew. I wasn't blind. I trusted someone who didn't deserve it. Now the townhouse is quiet again. Not lonely, peaceful. The final divorce decree will come through in a few months. Ethan's back living with his parents. Tessa moved on. Aiden vanished the moment consequences arrived. As for me, I'm still here. Still in the house I built with my own hands. Still doing my job. Still choosing stability over chaos. The only difference is this. I no longer confuse commitment with self-sacrifice. And I will never again let someone rewrite betrayal and call it growth. Stop! The final divorce decree arrived on an ordinary Thursday. No dramatic music. No final confrontation. Just a thin envelope in my mailbox, sandwiched between grocery flyers and an internet bill. I stood in my kitchen for a long moment, envelope in hand, listening to the hum of the refrigerator, the quiet of a house that finally belonged to me again. When I opened it, I didn't feel relief. I felt confirmation. 6 months. That was all it took to legally erase a marriage that had taken years to build and only minutes to destroy. Ethan didn't reach out after the hearing, not to apologize, not to say goodbye, not even to complain. According to the grapevine, he moved back into his childhood bedroom, the same one Diane had refused to repaint since he was 16. He was still receiving his spousal support checks on time, my lawyer made sure of that, but he treated them like proof he'd been wronged instead of consequences he'd earned. Tessa disappeared from the narrative almost immediately. She started dating someone else she met at the same conference where she met Ethan. Apparently, she had a pattern. Aiden, fired. Not for the affair, something unrelated, according to one of Ethan's former co-workers, but the timing was poetic enough that I didn't question karma's involvement. The gossip trickled in slowly, like background noise I hadn't asked for but couldn't fully mute. People at Ethan's job had known for months. Some had even joked about it. A betting pool, of all things. How long until Gwen finds out? 6 months, someone lost money on me. That part hurt in a dull, distant way. Not because I was embarrassed, but because it confirmed something important. I hadn't missed the signs. I'd chosen trust. There's a difference. One night, about a month after the paperwork finalized, I sat alone at the bar I'd built in the basement, running my fingers over the reclaimed wood. The lighting was warm, the sound system low. A glass of whiskey sat untouched in front of me. For the first time since the restaurant, I let myself rewind the tape, not to punish myself, but to understand. I remembered Ethan's restlessness, the way he spoke in borrowed language, how often he deferred to Aiden's opinions like they were gospel, how growth always seemed to require my discomfort, my silence, my flexibility. I realized something then that made me laugh softly into the empty room. He never wanted freedom. He wanted permission. Permission to betray me without consequences. Permission to keep the life I built while chasing novelty. Permission to call selfishness enlightenment and cowardice honesty. And when I didn't grant it, that was when he decided I was the problem. The townhouse looks different now. Not just painted, not just renovated. Claimed. The dusty rose bedroom is slate gray. The guest room is now an office with real doors and boundaries. The garage shelves are fuller. The workshop hums with half-finished projects and plans that don't require consensus. Every corner of the house reflects a choice I made without negotiation. Sometimes people ask me if I'm bitter. I'm not. Bitterness clings to what you still want. I don't want Ethan. I don't want his version of evolution. I don't want a relationship that requires me to shrink so someone else can feel expanded. What I want is exactly what I kept. My home, my stability, my name, my standards. I didn't win because the court sided with me. I won because I didn't let betrayal rewrite my worth. And if there's one thing I know for certain now, it's this. Anyone who needs to introduce you to your replacement before asking for your consent